Hey chat, how's everyone doing? Welcome to another Learn Swift Boston, another live stream. Hope everyone is doing good. It's been a month. Everyone's had a good month. Welcome to Beginner's Night. It's our first ever Beginner's Night. At least live streamed. We've been doing this since the very beginning of the meetup. So if this is your first time checking out one of our streams or one of our meetups in general, this is Learn Swift Boston, a meetup here in Boston, Massachusetts, where we normally meet physically, but given the times, here we are digitally. And we are a member of the Learn Swift City organization of meetups. I have a whole spiel I'd like to give at the top of every meetup. I'm going to do this one a little bit quick because I'm really excited to get started with some beginner topics. So there's a guy out in LA, quit his job, wanted to become a coder, got a book, started a meetup, started a podcast, and here we are 4 years later. There's a Learn Swift Boston in, I want to say most, but a bunch of major cities, and we are working on getting the website updated so that you can see that. So once quarantine is lifted across the world, hopefully you can find a Learn Swift city in your city, if not here in Boston, Massachusetts itself. We have a general agenda for our meetups. Oh man, again, I forgot to update this slide. I'm so sorry. The agenda goes at the top of the meetup, 6:45, introductions and announcements. That's what we're doing here. And then quickly we jump right into the discussion. Today's beginner's night. Ignore that refactoring. Normally when we do introductions, we ask you your name, but we can't see your faces, so we can't put a name to a face. But if you do let us know in Twitch chat the next thing you'd like to learn, that'd be super helpful. It gives us ideas for future meetups. It lets us know where you're at in your journey learning Swift and how we can help you sort of get to that next level. We have a sister meetup that is called Swift Coders, also usually here in Boston, Massachusetts. If you take a picture of this QR code on your screen or you use exclamation point links in the chat, you can get put directly onto the meetup page for that. They too have gone digital. I have yet to attend one digitally, but I hear it has been very good given the situation. We are also an affiliate with RayWenderlich.com. If you're not familiar with RayWenderlich.com, it is a source for all things mobile development. They have books and video series and tutorials all about iOS and Android development, including the basics of Swift, all the way up to some really complex things like advanced debugging techniques that will make your head spin. So if you use the QR code or again the link in exclamation point links, we will get a small portion of that proceeds that helps fund things for our meetup. And that is it for announcements. Super quick. Again, if you missed anything, go ahead, exclamation point links in the chat. There is a new link in the chat, which I'm super excited about. I've gone ahead and I've uploaded all of our past Learn Swift Boston live streams to our YouTube channel. So you can get the URL to that in chat by doing exclamation point links. I'm going to keep saying it all night long, so I hope you get used to that. Okay. Let's shake it out. Let's get ready. If you're watching this on a Mac computer, I highly encourage you to go ahead and open up Xcode, because I'm going to talk a lot slower now that we're through all the announcements, and I hope that you'll code along with me and ask any questions you might have about the code I'm writing or something you might be seeing on your screen, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. But before we do that, I quickly want to thank John Bell, CP Weirup, and Palin King for the new follows. Really appreciate that. Okay. So, if you go ahead, hopefully you've had enough time to open up Xcode at this point, you can click on Get Started with Playground. We're going to start there. DC McCullough, thank you for the follow. And we're going to start a blank playground. We're going to jump into a little bit more in-depth things, like actually building a small app, but we're going to start out with some of the absolute basics. And I'm just going to make a quick folder on my desktop so I can put all these things in one place. And we'll call this basics. So I'm just creating a quick playground called basics, and we're given this screen. And immediately Apple and Xcode have already provided us 2 lines of code, so we're off to a good start. What's up, man, COD? So we're going to ignore import UI kit. It's just there to help us if we want to do some UI rendering. I don't feel like we're going to do that, so let's ignore that line. But let's go straight down to var string hello playground. So if you're new to programming, this might be a very confusing line of code. And, pull this right off screen. That always happens when I do playgrounds. I don't know why. So let's break this down piece by piece. So the anatomy of this line is var, so we're declaring a variable. That's what var stands for. And we're giving that variable a name, and we're calling that str. And then this equal sign says, hey, take whatever is on the right side of my equal sign and put it into this variable. One of my coworkers says that this is not equals, it's gets. So he says it as str gets hello playground. And a string is anything that's inside of quotes. So I can create a new string, and I will call it hello stream. And inside of there I will type hello stream. Ooh, I messed this up. There we go. And you can see I've written this line a little bit differently, but it's got kind of the same anatomy. Now, the distinction between var and let are very, very important. Var is a variable meaning it can change. Let is a constant, so it cannot change. So if I add a couple of extra lines here, I can say str equals it's a cool night in Boston, and that's perfectly okay. But if I do hello stream equals I had to close my windows, I'm going to get an error from this playground from Xcode, and it's going to tell me cannot assign value hello stream is a let constant. So what this is saying is, hey, you set up here, this was never ever going to change, and down here you're trying to change that. So that's where that important distinction comes. If you expect a value to never ever change, you use the word let. Otherwise, var. Now, Xcode will do its best to help you when you get yourself into these rough spots. And this little pop-up red arrow has a stop sign in it. It usually looks like a circle, but I'm pretty sure it's a stop sign. And if we click on it, it can give us little hints of how to fix it. So it is telling me to change let to var to make hello stream mutable. So I can click this fix, and you'll see it went ahead and edited my code for me. Now be careful, because these quick edits don't always fix it the way that it needs to be fixed. I don't know if that's going to come up tonight, but if it does, I'll try my best to point that out. Cool. So now that we've got strings, let's talk about one other. They're called data types, and that's integer. So we have a whole bunch of data types, some that are what are called primitives, and they're super simple, like strings and integers, and things that are super complex that are massive data structures that will spin your head trying to comprehend. But don't worry about that. You don't need those for most applications. All you need is a few simple primitives. And so, just like string, I can make a var, let's call it count. And you can see up here, I didn't give this a data type, and I don't have to do that down here either, but I can, and that will help out the compiler, the thing that actually turns your code into your application. and I can say that it is going to be an integer, and I can give it a value, an initial value. So pretty much the same anatomy of the line, except for I've just added this little extra definition here. And I can even go ahead up here and do the same. Swift has something called type inference, so you're allowed to leave this off, and if it can, it will just figure out what that is. And for all primitives, most of the time it does that well. But okay, so we've got our count, and I'm going to introduce you now to something a little bit more complex. And it is going to be a for loop. There's a few different ways that you can write a for loop, and these are kind of where programming can start to get a little bit heady, so please do ask any questions if you have them. So a for loop will loop over a block of code any number of times based on how you define it. So our for loop, I'm going to say 0.10, and I'm going to put a curly brace like that. And I forgot the syntax for it because I never write them this way. Is it for underscore in ... I've been doing this for 7 years, programming iOS, and I still forget simple things like that. So if you get confused along your journey of learning, don't worry about it. We all struggle sometimes. Cool. So what we've got here is we've got the declaration. We're saying, hey, we're about to do a loop, and it is a for loop. This underscore is something that lets us ignore something, and I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. And then we're saying in this range of numbers, so in the range of 0 to 10, run this block of code. So we're going to run it 10 times. And I'm going to say print, first we'll do print count equals some interesting syntax that I'll talk about, and I'm going to do count plus equals 1. So in our code, when it runs, we will loop over these two lines 10 times, and we will first print to the console that our count, the word count, equals, and what this syntax is we're doing what's called escaping, and escaping allows us to put variables in the middle of a string. And so we are going to take the word count, and set it equal to the actual value of this variable. Or excuse me, we're going to print out the value of that variable. We're not setting it equal to it. Then we're going to increment that. So we're adding 1, and the equal sign after that says assign that back to count. And this might make a whole lot more sense if I go ahead and I hit run on this. So I click the little blue play button here, and you can see Xcode is starting to run, and here we go. So it printed out count equals 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 10. And we can see that this ran 11 times because I want to do 0 to 10 inclusive. That's what the third dot of this means. And if I take it down to 2, you should see that drop down 0 to 9. Oh. Did not mean. I forget. Maybe they took that out. It was an old thing in older Swift, maybe. I feel like you could do 2 dots. Anyway. There we go. Okay, so we just covered two pretty, I guess more than 2 things. We covered some pretty important things. Let's go back one step and let's talk about this underscore. So underscore in Swift is telling iOS and oh, Joe, thank you. To do inclusive, it's the arrow. The underscore is telling, nope, that's fine. That's fine. It doesn't matter. Thank you, though. The underscore is telling iOS and Swift and Xcode and everyone to ignore something. Usually it's a value that's passed back from a function or somewhere else in your code. But in this case, we can actually pass in a variable to our for loop. So if I wanted to have a name for the value that we're creating in this 0 to 10 inclusive, I can say var number. And so now I've got this yellow warning that says variable number was never used. Consider replacing it with the underscore, which we're trying to get away from. So now, instead of count plus equals 1, I can do count plus equals number. And we will see our print statements should change. Yeah. Look at that. So we go 0, 0, 1, 3, 6, 10, 15. So we're having some fun now. We're doing some computation. Doing a little bit more than just adding 1 to things. So that's loops. I think the last thing I want to cover before jumping in and starting a very simple app, let's talk about functions. So there are a few ways that you can do what's called encapsulation on your code, which is just a fancy word for put some curly braces around it and bundle it together. Sort of like, say, here's a logical chunk of code that makes sense amongst itself. And the way that you can do that is with a class. So we can call that some class. We can put some stuff in our curly braces. There's also a struct. And then there is a function. A function can live inside of either a class or a struct, and a struct or a class usually is the highest level thing. I say usually because there are some exceptions to that, but keeping it simple tonight, let's just say that those are the highest level of things. So, we have a function, and let's call this multiply. Okay, so just like everything, we at the start of a line say, hey, we're going to do a thing, give that thing a name, and then we follow the syntax for it. So in our case, to declare a function, you do an open and close parenthesis, followed by an open and close curly brace. So multiply with the parenthesis indicate that it's a function when you call it later in code. And I'll kind of talk about that in just a moment. Now, inside of our multiply function, we want to take one number and multiply it against another number and then give that back to you. So the way that you get code into a function is called parameters. So we can add parameters to our function. And we'll say num1, and it will be an integer or an int, and num2, which again will be an integer or an int. And the way that we say, hey, we're going to give you something back is with an arrow that comes out of the function, and we tell it what you should expect back. So this is now the most complex line that we have written, except for maybe the for loop. Let's break it down. We are telling iOS, hey, we want to declare a function by saying the word func. We give that function a name, which in our case is multiply. We have our first parenthesis to say, here is the area that we're going to pass in our parameters. Our first parameter is called num1, which is of type integer. And then our second parameter is num2, which is of type integer. And we are telling iOS that we expect to return something from our function with this arrow, and that it's going to be an integer. So once we have that defined, we can now go inside of our function, and you can see we've got an error already that says, excuse me, we're missing a return type for our function. Excuse me, we're missing a return statement. And so I'll just go ahead and start typing that now, and I can even do just return 1, and that should make Xcode happy with me. But that's not going to be multiplication. In fact, I can prove that to you because I can say multiply 10 and 10, and we would expect that to be 100. But instead, if I look over here on my right, we're getting back 1. Because that is what is coming out of our function. It's just the number 1 statically. So, simple math says, okay, let's put num1 and let's multiply it by num2. And the character for multiplication in programming tends to be the asterisk. And so now, if I rerun my code, we see 100. So what is happening is our return statement is taking the first parameter and it is multiplying it against the second parameter. Now, not every function needs to be one line. You can do a whole bunch of things. You can do basically anything inside of these curly braces. And if you don't like just having a return statement, you like to have some meat and potatoes to your function, you can make a variable for it. And we'll call it results. We will take our multiplication statement, put it up into results, and we'll return results instead of the multiplication directly. So I can run the code again, and you'll see we're still getting 100. To prove that I'm not a liar, we'll add a couple of zeros here, and we'll make it even bigger. Oh, make it even bigger. There it goes. So yeah, that's how you access functions in Swift. Now you don't always have to pass in parameters, so let's make one more quick function before we dive into code. And we'll call it increment count. And we're not even going to return anything, so we don't have to take anything, we don't have to return anything. And I'm just going to take our variable count, and I'm going to do plus equals 1 on it again. So we run everything. And count. Oh, sorry, I never called the function. So if I call the function after I've made it, we should now see that our count has gone up to 46. Now, it's a little bit confusing, but I promise you it's because we incremented it after we printed it. So we had 36 was our last value. You add 10 to it, that's 46. Then this should be 47. I will need to print out count one last time, and it should be 47. Why is it not 47? Oh, because we're no longer inclusive of 10, so we're adding 9 to the 36, which gives us 35. That's why. Okay. So that was a lot. I'm going to leave us up for a second in case anyone comes up with any questions they might have. There is no such thing as a stupid question on this stream. You know, I've already shown a couple of times just in these simple 32 lines of code that even I forget things, even I don't know everything. And thankfully Joe reminded me how to do a closed range in our loop up here. For the multiply function, couldn't you omit the num1 and num2? Good question. So technically no, because we need a name for it on the inside. But what I think you are getting towards is something like this. So let's call it func multiply again. Let's just call it multiply 2. And we're again going to return an int, and I'm just going to do this for right now. So we still need our parameters inside the function because we need to know what we're multiplying. But it's not very swifty to have parameters like num1 and num2, named parameters. Some functions you do want names for people to read, but multiply, you know what multiplication is, hopefully, and you know that it involves 2 numbers. So if we don't want to display those parameters to people, we put the underscore in front of it. Okay, so now if I call multiply 2, I can pass in, let's do 6 and 6. And I'll run that, and we should get 36 over here. I don't know why it takes 2 runs. Why are you taking 2 runs, Swift? Oh, because we're still returning. Num1 times num2. And this actually brings up an interesting thing that I'll talk about in a moment. So you can see I no longer have num1 at the front of my function. I just can say directly 6. Num2 is still there, and num2 is there because I left out the underscore for it. Because you can actually give parameters or function parameters 2 names. So if I put another word in front of num2, you're going to say this is telling me my function signature is no longer correct. It's saying, here, let me fix it for you. So I have changed my function signature to now be multiply 6 by 6. So Swift, the creators of Swift really encourage your code to be very sentence-like in structure. So this makes it a little bit more ergonomic to say we're going to multiply 6 by 6 or 6 by 10. We don't need that. Instead of by, I could use the underscore and the function would turn into this. It all comes down to what helps you understand the code the best. And in fact, I don't have to do 2 parameters here. I could just say by here, but now this code on line 36 no longer reads very sentence-like. It's very confusing. I'm multiplying num1 by? What does that mean? So the little things that they put in to make the language nice and a little bit more readable when you go and actually execute your code. Great question. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and close our playground, and in Xcode I'm going to go File, New. We're going to go to Project, and we're going to see if in about an hour and 15 minutes I can make a simple calculator, and hopefully you can make it along with me. So when you start a new project, whether from the splash screen or from the File menu, you'll be presented with these options. I know when I started iOS, all of this was really daunting. I didn't know what any of these things were, and there were much more in this list than there are today. But for simplicity's sake, I will tell you that most of the time you're going to need either a single view app or a tabbed app if you're making I don't know how you would describe it. I guess not a game. If you're making a game, you'd want to do game. If you're doing something just with AR, you start getting into these other fun things. But for the most part, you're going to be making either a single view app or a tabbed app. And the best part is you can change it later if you make the wrong choice, or the choice that's not quite right for you at the time. So I'm going to hit next, and we're shown this screen. I'm going to give the product a name. We're going to call it Calculator. You might have some of these things, you might not have other things. You definitely don't have my name in there. But talking through these things real quick, product name is the name of your app. You can change it later. It's also the display name of your app when you run it on a device or put it into the App Store. Again, you can change it later. If you are on a team, which I have signed up for the developer program, so I am on a team called My Name. You might have your company name if you work for a company, or you might have nothing there if you haven't signed up for the developer program, because you don't actually have to. So you might have none there, and that's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. You have organization name, which again is probably your company or yourself or nothing, doesn't matter. And then the organization identifier. And you can see right below organization identifier something called a bundle identifier. And these two things come together to uniquely identify your app if and when you're ready to put it on the App Store. We will not be putting this calculator on the App Store because it will not be very pretty, because I'm going to be making it super quick. And also, I feel like there's enough calculators on the App Store, so we don't really need another. But you can kind of see it almost looks like a web address, but in reverse. So it is com.myname, which is actually the team name that gets translated down. This is a very common practice in programming, and especially in iOS and macOS applications, where you do the reverse of a web URL like that to sort of identify your app. And so our organization identifier is com.mattdias, and Xcode automatically puts in the product name from up here. So our bundle identifier to identify our app uniquely is com.mattdias.calculator. Next, we can pick our language. This is Learn Swift, not Learn Objective-C, so we're not going to touch that. And then we have user interface. This session, we're going to stick with storyboard, but if you come back next month, we're going to do Swift UI. It's going to be very terrifying for me because I have never even looked at Swift UI. I think I popped my head into the session for like 2 seconds. I said, nope, not for me. But next month, we're doing it. Finally. So get hyped for that. And then we're going to ignore everything down here. Core data is a database technology. Don't need it for a calculator. Unit tests are a way to make sure your code works. They're really great, but we're not going to worry about those tonight because this is beginner's night. And UI test, same thing as unit tests. Make sure your code works, but a little bit more than I want to cover tonight. Finally, it's going to ask you where do you want to save this. We're going to put it on our desktop in our folder that I created. And boom. We've got Xcode and a project put together for us. And in fact, we can go ahead and hit this play button, and Xcode will go ahead, compile our code, and it's going to bring up a simulator for us. Yes, SwiftUI, the day has come. In fact, while this is bringing up the simulator, I will say, not this Saturday, but starting the Saturday after, and every Saturday until our next meetup, I'm going to be streaming on this channel while I learn. I've been playing music this whole time. I'm so sorry. I'm going to be streaming me learning Swift UI right here on this channel the whole time through. It must have been very annoying to listen to that same song for 40 minutes. I'm so sorry. So if you come back and check it out, you can laugh at someone that has been making apps for 7 years that has no idea what's going on anymore. It's a very terrifying thing for me. But our simulator is up and we've got a plain white screen. Yeah, so that music, a little bit behind the scenes, Twitch very recently decided that it was going to start honoring DMCAs. So if you are playing copywritten music in your stream, they will eventually ban your account if you don't stop. and so I quickly wrote that song with a friend of mine. So it was never meant to play for 40 minutes, but it was meant to play a little bit. Ricky, welcome to Beginner's Night. So the reason our simulator screen is white is because this right here is white. And what is this? This is, oh, thank you. I'm glad you like the song. This is a storyboard. A storyboard gets its name from, I believe, television, maybe even movies. Probably movies, they came first. But when you are coming up with the idea for either a TV show or a movie, you do something called storyboarding. And you sort of draw pictures either on paper or on a whiteboard, and you act out a scene using them. So we're kind of the same here, where I can pull out multiple view controllers and I can draw lines that say here are how these things are associated. And it sort of storyboards our app together. So that's how a storyboard got its name, I assume. I wasn't there. But we're not going to need that because we're making a very simple calculator app. But to prove that I am not lying, we can change our background color over here by going to this shield icon, which is called the Attributes Inspector. Again, doing this for 7 years, and I have no idea what the things are called in Xcode. And once we're in the Attribute Inspector, we can go change our background color to anything that's in here or custom. Let's go custom for giggles. And I'm a big fan of green, so let's take down these colors and let's bring green out. Not that violent of a green, more of like a hunter green. That feels pretty good. And if I go ahead and hit Command R or hit that play button again, we'll rerun our app and it should be green. Perfect. So if you are coding along at home, which I highly encourage, go ahead, change your background color to whatever your favorite color is. Just make it your heart's desire. So that is the main storyboard. You can have multiple storyboards. I would not worry about that until you start working on a team with multiple people. And the reason I say that is it's nice to have your app all in one place, but also it's a little bit extra overhead, and the only reason you'd want multiple storyboards is so that two people can be working on the UI at the same time. This is just a giant XML file, and if two people are trying to edit that at the same time, things get really weird. So that's why Apple introduced multiple storyboards. Cool. So we're building a calculator. I want mine to be green. Yours can be whatever color you like. And if I option click or alt if you're not on a Mac keyboard and click on this plus up here, we get our little object, what's this called? Object library. And this has all of the UI elements that are natively available in iOS, from a button to a label all the way down to some AR stuff. It gets pretty crazy. CMARS, have a good night. You can catch the VOD for sure, and we also have a YouTube channel now. Exclamation point links in the chat if you want to get that YouTube. We don't have a Discord though. Maybe in the future. We'll talk about that. But yeah, so you can get pretty much anything, even gestures, in this object navigator. So we're gonna need some buttons. Let's drag from our object navigator a couple of buttons, and you can see getting a little bit of a pinwheel, but I've dragged it out here. It's really hard to see the blue on the green, but there it is. So let's do 3 buttons to start. I'm just going to drag those all out there, and I can hit the X on my little object navigator. Get rid of that. Because now we've got our 3 buttons. I'm going to do some stuff in here. I want to make my background color white real quick, just so you all can see things a little bit nicer. Or black. Apparently black. Oh, clear color? No. System background. There we go. Turn on my lights because I just blinded myself with that bright white. Okay, so we've got 3 buttons on our screen. Hopefully you all do too if you're coding at home. And I can click on them individually and I will get a pane right here on the right in our little shield that is again called the attribute inspector. I remembered it without the helper text coming up. And we can do a bunch of things. We can change the type, but we're not going to. We can change state configuration, but we're not going to. Whole bunch of things. In fact, all we really care about is this word button. And I don't know why they didn't give this a label, but this is the text that's actually inside of your button. So I'm going to say that this is 1. And if I hit enter, you can see over here our button has changed to the number 1. And I'm just going to increase this font size to 30. 30 feels good. And if I go to the little ruler, I can look at a bunch of insets that aren't important to us tonight, but also the XY position. So the coordinate system is where things exist on this coordinate plane, I guess, on your screen. And 0, 0 is in the top left. So X is still left to right, and Y is still top to bottom. It just is 0, 0 up here. So if I drag this up here, you can see it says 20 and 44, but if I sneak it over enough, I can get it to 0, 0 maybe. There you go. So now our X and Y are 0, 0, but obviously I don't want my button up there. And also I can modify my width and my height, or I can just drag this little bar, and I'm going to make it a 52 by 52 square. Once you have your little square button, you can follow suit, and the second button that we're going to do, we'll have this one be 2. And we'll make this also a size 30 font. Wow, my computer's rolling slow today. There we go. And I got to that by clicking on the T instead of using the up and down arrows here. And we'll again make this a square that is 52 by 52. And then our third button, we're going to have this be plus. Now you can see I double clicked on my button here, which is another way that you can modify the label inside of it. And we'll make this one 30 as well. And also 52 by 52. Cool. So we've got our 3 buttons. Arrange them however you want. I'm going to make a sort of smiley face with them just to make myself smile a little bit. I'm going to take a quick break right here because my dog keeps jingling the bells. That is his signal to me that he wants to go out. So hold on tight for just a few minutes. I'm going to take my dog out. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Bob Gilmore, thank you for the follow. How did I get to the components list? Oh, it's called library. Yes, Shift Command L can do it. You can also click on this plus button in the top right. Yeah, Joe. I have never known the names for any of these things. To me, it's page, clock, question, postage stamp, shield, ruler, arrow. Over here it's folder, vault, diagram, magnify, warning. I do know this is the test symbol, stack, breakpoint, build. And these are all just whatever things. But I've never taken the time to learn any of these names. Okay. So picking up where we left off, we've got our 1, 2, and plus buttons. And I'm going to option click on view controller over here, which will open it up in this right pane. There is another way to do it, but they changed it to this. So it is this icon here that is a little plus pane thing. Add editor on the right. And if you hold option, you can add it below. But we're going to add it on the right. And we're going to have that be our view controller on the left now. That's why I like to option click, because it just puts it where I expect it. And we're going to okay. We're going to ignore our 2 button for a second. Yeah. No, we're not. Okay. So we're going to right click on our 1 button and we're going to drag from our storyboard into our code. And we're going to do it below this view did load function. And we're going to let go of that right click. This window over here is going to pop up. And it's going to say you're trying to make an action inside of view controller. Give that name. And our name is going to be Untapped. And we're going to hit the connect button, ignoring everything else. We're going to do the same for 2, right below our 1 function that just got made for us. I'm going to say 2 tapped. And right below that, we're going to do plus tapped. So what we have just done is we have made 3 IB actions. IB stands for Interface Builder. Interface Builder is the part of Xcode that gives us storyboards and something called zibs, which are kind of like detached storyboards. We can also make other things. So if I dragged this above view did load, you would make an IB outlet for me, and I can call that 1 button, but that doesn't really matter because we're not going to do anything with a variable. So it's the difference of dragging above and below view did load. If you drag above, it creates a variable for you and hooks it up as an IB outlet. If you drag it below view did load, it gives you a function and it hooks it up as an IB action. And so what that is doing is saying, hey, this thing that is graphically represented over here, I want to represent it over here in my code so that I can do things with it. That's what the IB action and the IB outlet give us. I'm going to leave the outlet there because I might do a little something with it to talk about once we get our code working a little bit. So we can run this with no real code in our function, and having just basically dragged 3 things onto the screen, you can see our 3 things are here on the screen. It's my simulator sitting next to my storyboard. It looks a little bit different. That's because this is an iPhone SE and this is an iPhone 11. So if I change my simulator to an iPhone 11, they should look the same. Bob, I know you don't need to go out. We just went out. Don't ring the bells, please. And we're just loading up our simulator. There it is. So now it looks a little bit more like it does in the storyboard. And the reason that these are different is because the SE is a smaller screen size, and we're not doing something that's called auto layout that defines some rules of how your UI should be painted on different screen sizes. I don't know if we have that scheduled as a topic this year, but if that is something that Twitch chat is interested in knowing more about, If we have time at the end of tonight's session, I can talk about it. Otherwise, let us know and we can do a session or a non-meetup stream about it for sure. Okay. So now we need to start getting some code together to make our calculator. So up here above view did load, let's define a variable and we'll call it selected number. We will set that equal to 0. And in our onTapped function, we will set selected number equal to 1. You can see, and I'll show you again here in 2Tapped, I started to type the word selected, and this nice window popped up and said, hey, do you mean selected number, or self this other way, or select? And if you hit the enter key, it will just automatically populate whatever you have highlighted in that table. So that's a quick way to not have to type out an entire line of code, especially as your lines of code get quite large. It's a nice little cheat for the lazy, which programmers tend to be pretty lazy people. And I don't mean that in like a physical way. Like, we just don't like typing, even though our job is to type. Cool. So now we have our selected number, and we're going to set it to be whatever button you have tapped here. And we're going to have another variable. We'll call it result. And we'll set that equal to 0. So that's going to be our running total. In fact, let's call it total. And down in our plus function, we're going to say total equals total plus selected number. So this is kind of the same as that plus equals that I did before in the playground. So I can do total plus equals selected number instead of writing it out long like this. These two lines are exactly the same as far as Swift and Xcode is concerned, so do whichever makes the most sense to you. People usually like to prefer the plus equals because it's a little bit shorter, but do whatever makes your heart feel good. Okay, so we've got a little bit of math going, which is great, but now we don't have anywhere to tell you what our total is. So let's jump back into our storyboard, which is on the right for me. It might be on the left for you. We're going to hit our plus button again after we've clicked inside of the storyboard, because if you don't, you're going to hit that plus button, you're going to get all these weird code things. We don't want the code things. We want to click on our storyboard and then hit the plus so that we're getting storyboard things. And we're going to drag out 2 labels. Our first label, we're going to say result. That's going to be a hard-coded string. And our second label, we're going to have this text be 0. And then we're going to create that IB outlet again, right-clicking or option-clicking and dragging over to our view controller. And we'll call this result label. So again, I hit the plus button up here. I dragged in 2 labels. I changed the first label's name to be result by double-clicking on it. I changed the second label's value to be 0. You can again double-click on it, or you can do it over here in the attribute inspector. I'm going to get it. And then you're going to option left-click and drag over to the view controller. Or excuse me, it's control-click, I believe. Yeah, it's control-click. Sorry about that. You're going to control-click over, or I prefer right-click. That's why I don't know my difference between Alt or Option and Control. But once we have our outlet set up, we now have somewhere to put our value. So far we've been working with digits because that's what math tends to do, especially when you're doing simple calculators. But we need to now put that value into our result label, the variable, so that we can get it in our result label, the UI element. So that's where these IP outlets come in handy. So I can say result label dot text. So that is the text of this label. And I'm going to set that equal to, I'm going to open up my string with my double quotes. I'm going to type my // I don't know the difference of those either, Joe. I'm going to do my open and close paren so that I can do my escaping to put my variable in there. I'm going to say total. So every time we hit this plus button, we will set our total variable, which is declared up here, equal to the total variable's current value plus whatever number you have tapped on before. And the default for that is 0. So if I just hit plus a whole bunch in the beginning, you're going to see 0 forever. And to prove I'm not lying to you, let's go ahead and hit run. So if I hit plus a whole bunch, nothing happens. If I hit 1 and then plus, it'll go up by 1. Thanks for checking out DMC Caller, and thank you for the follow. Yeah, check out the VOD. Also check us out on YouTube, ! Links in the chat for that URL. So I hit the 1 and I hit the plus, it goes up by 1 more. I hit the 2, it should go up to 4. Beautiful. So we've got a little calculator going on. And I can hit the plus a whole bunch. You can see this has gotten cut off. So if we compare the ! Links in the chat. So if we compare our storyboard to our simulator, you can see this little box is just the size of the 0, and now we've got something bigger than the 0. So if I drag this out, we can put in a whole bunch of extra stuff. And again, this is because we're doing auto layout, or we're not doing auto layout. All of this will be fixed if we're doing UI the way that Apple wants us to, but that's a little bit deeper than your first app. So having dragged this out now, I can rerun. And let's put 2, we'll hit plus a whole bunch, and you can see now, we can see our double-digit number pretty well. So, very simple calculator. We can add 1 to itself, or 2 to that 1, or 2 to whatever. And that's about it. So, chat, do we want to add in subtraction, or do we want to add in more numbers? Tell me, where would you like to take this next? We can also stop here and do some auto layout if that's something that's interesting to you. Also, if you have any questions about the code that I just wrote, please ask them. This is beginner's night. We want you to understand everything that's going on so that you can get going on your Swift journey and making apps. Let's go ahead. Let's add some more numbers. Let's add some more numbers. So I'm going to drag my plus down, and I'm going to option click on my plus again, and let's pull out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. So I just dragged out a whole bunch of buttons. So if you want this to stay up longer, again, you option click on this plus, or you can just hit that plus every time and drag a button out, or I believe you can do a Command C and Command V on it. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. Hey Sarah, how's it going? thanks for checking out the stream. So I'll drag up this button that will eventually become my 3 button. I will make it my 52 by 52. You think you understand view and controller in Swift now? Great. Yeah, so a view controller at its simplest point is a screen. And that kind of is a lie. But in the beginning, I think it's absolutely right as a beginner to conceptualize a view controller as a screen. But you can have a view controller be a screen that's inside of your screen. So maybe I want something that has a whole bunch of functionality that just floats in the middle of the screen. I can make that a view controller or not. It doesn't matter. But a view controller is something that controls a view, which generally is the entire screen. And there are a bunch of different view controllers. So a UI view controller is the base level of it. We also have a UI table view controller. You can see it's got view controller in the name, just to let you know that it is a child of this. So if I command click into that, you can see that there's a colon and then UI view controller. This is saying that our open class of UI table view controller is a UI view controller. What are the delegate Swift files for? Great question. That's going to take us on a tangent, and we can go there if you'd like. So in computer science, there is something called design patterns, and these are ways of structuring your code that are mutually agreed upon. And one of those patterns is the delegate pattern. And just like in real life, if you have like a delegate at UN, it speaks for your country. A delegate in code speaks for a different set of code. In the case of table views, which is where you're most often going to see it, let's bring up our storyboard real quick. So let's bring out a view controller. And inside of our view controller, I'm going to put a table because that's where we most often see the delegate pattern, even though you can totally set up your own custom delegates. And they are super cool to make. I love the delegate pattern. Over here in our folder, we're going to do a right-click, new file. And I'm going to make a new Cocoa Touch class. And we'll call this example view controller. And it's going to be a UI view controller. I will hit next. It will say, hey, do you want to put this in this folder? I will say create it there. I am going to click back on my storyboard in the folder on the left. I'm going to click on this top bar above the view controller, and I'm going to go to the postage stamp, which is also known as its real name, which is the identity inspector. And if you click on this top bar before going into your identity inspector or after, you'll see this custom class, and we'll have a class, and in here we'll call it example view controller. And if you hooked everything up right, it should suggest example view controller to you is what you're trying to type. So now this is starting to make the relationship that we already had by creating our storyboard. So we have added a new view controller that has a view inside of it. That's our table view. And we have created a file called example view controller, and we have told Xcode and iOS that this view controller here in our storyboard is in fact our example view controller. And that's an important step because otherwise I cannot create an IB outlet for our table view inside of our example view controller. So once you've made this outlet, we can start talking about the delegate pattern. So our table view here, actually let's go back, and real quick, if I drag this arrow from our calculator over to our example view controller, now we're telling Xcode that this is our first view controller, and I can hit run. And we can see there's just a table chilling in the middle of our screen. So that's how I know I hooked up my outlet correctly. And now we can talk about delegates. So there aren't necessarily delegate files. You can put your delegate code in its own file, but the delegate is the pattern of saying, hey, this block of code speaks for this other block of code. And so if I command click into my table view, I can jump to its definition. And it tells me all the things that are inside of it. And somewhere in this file, just above the table view, it looks like they declare a protocol that is the UI table view delegate. And this is saying, here are all the functions that a delegate of a table view can use. And above this probably is UI table view data source, maybe not. Somewhere else in this file is also the data source, which technically is also a delegate, but they call it data source instead because it has special meaning as far as like tables go. So if I go back to example view controller and I say that it is a UI table view, I hit tab there to finish typing the word for me. I'm going to make it a UI table view delegate and a UI table view data source. If I wait a second, Xcode will yell at me and say, hey, you're not conforming to this protocol. So there are a couple of required functions so that if you're going to say that you are a UI table view data source, you must implement these two functions. And it is telling us the number of rows in our table view for a given section and the cell for our table view in a given index path, which is the index of where it's at in the table. So if I just quickly write return 10 for our number of rows, we'll get 10 cells in our table. And here I'm going to return a UI table view cell that I'm going to make. I'm going to give the cell some text in its text label. I'm going to use the index path.row, which is the actual where it's at in the table. And if I return that cell and I hit run, we should see 10 cells with 10 numbers in it, 0 to 9. I did not. Now, why did I not? I know the answer. Chat, I'm going to give you a chance to see if you know the answer. I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with the delegates. It is that I never told that table view who its delegate is. And if I tell it that it is myself, this view controller, we should now see our cells show up. And I'm just going to move these table view functions down here with our other functions. And if you hit Control I, if you get weird indenting like that, Control I will fix the indenting for you. So now I'm going to run my code that I've set up my delegate and my data source, and we see our numbers 0 to 9. So what is happening is this table says like, hey, I need someone to tell me how many rows and cells I have. And because I've made my example view controller a table view delegate and data source, I can then say, don't worry table, I've got you covered. I'm your delegate, I'm your data source. And because of these two functions, we now have numbers in our table. So example view controller is delegating responsibility for table view. If that helps you out, Ricky. So that was a quick little tangent about design patterns and specifically the delegate pattern. But let's jump back in our storyboard and we'll move our arrow back to our calculator. Let's keep making that. But that was a great question, Rookie, and anyone else has any question, even if it's not about the calculator that we're building, feel free to ask it. I'll do my best to answer. So I'm holding down Options so I can scroll in. I can also hit these pluses and minuses down here to do our zooming. And I'm just going to align these buttons so that it looks a little bit like a calculator might be laid out. And I can hold down Shift and click on all of these and go into my ruler, and I can edit all of them at the same time and make them 52 by 52, which is what all of our buttons have been so far. Yeah, if you look up the delegation pattern, it's used a whole bunch in UIKit. I don't know about Swift UI because, as I said earlier, I've yet to do anything with that. But if you check out streams every Saturday, except for this one coming, I'm going to be learning Swift UI until our next meetup. So you can come watch and laugh at me not understand what I'm doing. So yeah, I can edit all the buttons at the same time by holding down Shift. In anything that's common, we can edit at the same time. So I made the frame the same size, and now I'm making the font the same size for all of them. I'm going to click out of that so I can give them individual values. And it's just going to be rinse and repeat for a bit here, so feel free to do this at your own pace. But I'm just going to give all these numbers, and then I'm going to give them all function references, and I'm going to hook them up to the code the same way that we did for 1 and 2. So I'll drag my function down into here to create an action. We'll call that 3 tapped. And I'll drag 4 in, and we'll call that 4 tapped. 5, and so on and so forth. But yeah, the delegate pattern is a great way to keep your code clean because you get to say, hey, this other thing is going to handle the code maintenance for me. So you could have that be in a separate file or not. We could actually make that table view delegate and data source inside of the example view controller in a different block of code if we wanted to. A lot of people like to do that because it makes your code a little bit more organized. But sort of like the moral of the story is do whatever makes sense to you as long as it works. And if you checked out our last stream, I talked about refactoring, and that's available on our YouTube channel, ! Links in the chat. And I talked about like, this is how I organize my code. You don't have to organize your code the same way. Do whatever makes sense for you. So now that I've got IB actions for all of my numerical buttons in our calculator, I'm going to select this line and hit Command C so I copied it in my pasteboard. I'm going to click on line 31, hold down Control and Shift, and then click on 34, 37, and so on and so forth. This is a little known feature of Xcode, starting with Xcode 11. You have multi-cursors, so I can edit multiple lines at once, and that's allowing me to paste in that variable so I don't have to type it a whole bunch. And I'm just going to come down and do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you can also just copy paste this in all the functions. Again, whatever is easiest for your fingers and your programming style. So we added in all our numbers, super quick, super easy. I will run our app. How do you do the multi-cursor? It is Control and Shift while you're clicking. So if I hold down Control Shift and I left click, left click, left click, I get all the multi-cursors. And whatever I type goes in all the same places. So now I should be able to hit 9 and plus, we'll see 9 in there, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and a 0, but we're not going to see that 0 does anything. Cool. So our buttons are hooked up right, and now let's do let's add in some more operations. So we can hit Command C and Command V, and we can copy paste our plus button twice. 3 times. Let's do 3 times. And organize the buttons however suits your fancy. Before object-oriented programming, the more Swift files, the better. Yeah, object-oriented. So, a little bit of a rant. I feel like people think that object-oriented programming is dead with Swift because you can do all these other fancy things. And object-oriented programming's been around since the 70s, and it's in all over iOS. The table view controller is a subclass of UI view controller. That's inheritance. That's object-oriented programming. So like, yeah, you don't have to use it, but you've never had to use it in most programming languages. It just makes things all a whole lot easier. And I'm there with you. I prefer it. It's nice to define things once. So I made a minus, a multiplication, star, and a slash for division. And I'm just going to quickly hit this arrow to make sure. Yeah, so because I copy pasted my plus, you can see the touch up inside is already defined for minus, star, and division. So I'm just going to hit this X over here that it, again, is in this little plus menu here. So that basically what that's saying is these 3 buttons are also hooked up to our plus function, and we don't want that. We want these to function differently. So I'm again going to right click and drag below our plus tapped. I'm going to say minus tapped. And multiply tapped. And divide tapped. These are just the names that I'm choosing. You can name it peanut butter if you'd like. Doesn't matter. And I'm going to again copy paste these 2 lines that we've written because programmers are lazy and I just want to copy paste. And for our minus, I will change our plus to the minus. For our multiply, I will change the plus to the asterisk. And for division, I will change it to the slash. So if I hit run, we should have a pretty functioning. We should have a pretty good calculator. So let's do 7 plus 8 plus 9 divided by 2. uh, right. So a few things are going on here. We've actually introduced our first couple of bugs. So let's take a moment, drink our water, and think about how we want to fix that. Okay, so it is kind of non-standard the way that we have built our calculator. Usually when you select a number, you don't hit your sign after. So what we've got going on, and let's rerun this so we're back at 0. What our code says for our operators, excuse me, is take the selected number and do the math on it. So we have to first select a number and then say what we're doing. So now our result is 8. Then I would select another number and say what we're doing, and this should be 17. Then I select another number and say what we're doing, and it should be 12. So that's kind of weird. And now we can fix that a number of ways. And I guess the way that I'm going to fix it is going to introduce something a little bit more advanced. So at the top of the stream, if you weren't here, I was talking about how programming has different data structures, and the ones that we had been using so far were string, which is inside quotes, and integers. So we've got two problems with our calculator. One is that total is an integer, so now that we've brought in division, we can't have that anymore. We need fractions. And so we can fix that by saying that total is a float, which is a floating point number, which is what the decimal is. There is another name for it, which is also double. They have different precisions, which is like a whole computer science thing. Basically, that means like how accurate is your decimal point into how many places. Most of the time, you can get by with float. Sometimes double is necessary. There's another one called long that you sometimes need. I've only ever needed it once in my career. And in fact, I needed something that's called the long, which is weird. So now that we've made total a float, we can do cannot convert into float. So we've got 4 errors here. And the simplest way to fix this is to set selected number to also be a float. But we could do something that's called casting down here in all these places. So if I run this, I can now do 9 plus 8 divided by... Oop. Did that wrong because I forgot that our calculator is weird. So I can do 9 plus 8 plus 2 divided, and we should see 8.5. So that's great. So that fixes one of our bugs. The next bug is that we're doing all these operations without an equal sign. which is a little bit weird. And so we need a way that we can make this a little bit normal like other calculators, so that I can do 1 plus 2 equals. So first things first, let's go back into our main storyboard. Excuse me. And let's rearrange our buttons a little bit. So we'll put these 4 across and kind of center them up as best we can. And I'll bring in another button that I'll have be the whole width. And we'll drag it out to be 52 tall like the rest of them. And we'll have this be equal at 30-point font as well. And we will option click on our view controller so that we can hook that up to a function. That we will call equal tapped. What have I done? That's fine. So there are data structures, going back to that topic, that Apple has defined for us. And those are primitives like float, string, and then there are more advanced objects like UI view controller. So we've actually been using objects and object-oriented programming this whole time. And we're going to define our own object. And we can do that with a class, we can do that with a struct. But for this example, we're going to do an enum, and we're going to call it operator. So what an enum is, and some people call it enum, I won't judge you for that, but I've always known it as enum because it's an enumeration, which I guess makes it enum. Uh-oh. I've been saying it wrong my whole life. So what an enum is a fixed set of values. So it's a data structure that says this can only ever be these things. A float can be any number between, let's see, does it tell us? No, but we can get it out of our playground. Float.max, capital float.max. Greatest finite magnitude. Yeah, so your float can be anything up to this gigantic scientific number. But our enum can only be these set things that we say that it is. And that's going to be plus, case minus, case multiply, case divide. And this is a new syntax for us, this case word. Case is just a weird word that says, here's one of my finite values that can be inside of my enum. And down here, I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to call it current operator. And I'm going to introduce a concept that is called an optional. So anything that has a question mark afterwards is an optional. So we're saying current operator may or may not have a value, but if it does have a value, we expect that to be an operator, which is our custom object that we have created. And so down here in our functions where we're doing our plus and our actual math, we can change our code so that we only do this math when equal is tapped. So let's copy and paste that into here. That should be multiply with a y. I did multiple. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate that, Joe. So we're going to move that code down into our equal tapped, and we're going to change our plus tapped to be current operator equals dot plus. This is also new syntax, and this is shorthand for operator dot plus because we have the finite values. We know that in our case of addition is going to be plus. Our minus is going to be current operator dot minus. Current operator equals dot multiply. Is there an actual name for the multiply and divide signs? Not like plus and minus. Anyway, so when our equal is tapped, we're going to do a switch, which is another fancy word for we're going to check if something is something, and it'll make a little bit more sense. I can't be any more specific about that until you actually see the code, I think. So we're going to switch over our current operator. So what this is doing is saying, hey, what is current operator? If it is plus, do this line of code. If it is minus, do this line of code. If it is multiply, do this line of code. Or if it's divide, do this line of code. So now we can remove line 98 because that is handled by our switch statement. So one of these things should catch it, but because, and we've got an error saying our switch must be exhaustive, we need the case.none since this is an optional. And in the case.none, we're just going to print, didn't do math right. We're still going to update our total so that we can still say result label equals total. And let's give that a run to see if we have built a little bit more of a correct calculator. So I can do 1 plus 2 equals 2. That's wrong. Huh. Well, that's because we're only letting people select one number at a time. So when I hit the plus, all we're doing is setting the operator. So I bet if I hit 2 again and then equals, we'd get 4. We're losing the first value exactly. We all just call it division sign, multiplication sign. Yeah, I thought so. The division sign is actually an oblius. That's interesting. But you're right, we're up. We are losing the value. And the way that we're going to fix that, how are we going to fix that? We're going to need some way to temporarily store that value. Do, 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 do. So we can store that. I was going to say we can store that in total, but we can't really. So what we can do is we can introduce yet another variable. Type in not the word variable, var. And this will be operand, and it will also be a float. We'll also set it to 0 to start. And each time that we hit the plus, we can do operand equals selected number. Then I don't know if that's going to work. Never mind. I'm getting tired, and you can tell. So if you put 2 slashes into the code, it becomes code that's ignored, and you can write things. You can also do a slash and a star, and you can make a block. So let's talk through what math is real quick. So we tap on something and we put that into selected number. Then we tap on plus. Then we tap on the next thing. So when you tap on plus, we want operand to equal selected number. And selected number to equal 0. So that we can tap on the next selected number before we hit equal. And that's only going to get us so far. So before we go writing that code, let's see if we can make it right the first time. So this works if all I do is tap a number, tap a plus, tap a number, tap equal. What happens if I hit plus again? So if I hit plus again, operand, we need total to equal operand. No, that's not right. We need total to equal operand plus selected. And we need to clear out selected. So that we can then set another selected number before hitting equal. Okay. So I will Control Shift click into all 4 of my operation functions, and I will do operand equals selected number, and then selected number equals 0. Ooh. Depends on what you want to happen at that point. Either perform the operation or reset the operation. Yeah. I'm sort of like, in my head, I'm thinking about the old, like, in your hand calculator you had in math class where you'd hit a number, you'd hit the plus, you'd hit the number, you hit the plus, you hit the number, and then you hit equal to get the total. And we can definitely display the running total as we're going. In fact, that might be what we do. So instead of all of this noise, we can do total equals current number. Oh, excuse me, selected number. Nope. Okay. If total equals 0, total equals selected number. And if it's not, oh, it did mean double equal. So the difference between double equal and a single equal is an important one in programming, but also in Swift. When it's a double equal, you're checking equality. When it's a single equal, you're doing an assignment. And that goes back to when we were in the playground earlier. I mentioned that my coworker says this line as total gets selected number. I would think of it as total is assigned to selected number, or total is selected number. Whereas this is if total is equal to 0. Double equals is the actual word equal, and single equal is the assignment, where we're setting the value. So if total is equal to 0, we will set total equal to selected number. So then we're here, we're good. Then we can select a new number, and then we're here. So we're gonna need, Oh, this is interesting. So we can actually get rid of this switch statement inside of our equal tapped. So I'm going to put an else on all of these. So if the one thing, do this. If the other thing, do that. So then we're going to do total plus equal selected number, which really we don't even need. We are going back to the way that it used to be. So we don't need this. You can go back to this. This can be total minus equal selected number. This can be so these we still want the equals, or excuse me, the if else. So if total is 0, total selected number, otherwise total times selected number times equal. And in fact, I don't think that matters here. And here is where it actually matters. So if total is not equal to 0, total divided equal selected number. Else total equals selected number. Is that right? I guess so. So then we can get rid of the switch statement, because now we're doing the math in line, but our equal tapped will still put up our result. So let's do 8 plus 9. Uh-oh. So I select a number. Selected number should be 8. I hit plus. Total should be equal to 8, 9. And then I hit equal. Ah. Because we still need our switch statement. The reason we still need our switch statement is we've selected the next number, but we've not done that final equation. So that should be 17 there, divided by 2 equals, uh-oh. So now we have a new issue. So after someone hits equals, we can hit our current operator. We can set that to nil, so that gets rid of a value so that there is nothing left in current operator, which would be our none case. So if we have no operator, and we come into here, so we're going to need to move this line first of all, because we want that to happen last. And we can say if current operator is equal to nil, we'll do something. So if current operator is equal to nil, which means we just hit the equal sign or we haven't done anything yet, I think we want to do nothing, right? So we'll do our 8 plus our 9, we'll get our 17, divided by 2 equals 8.5, divided by 2, so this should be 4.25. Yeah. Plus 8, 12.25. What? Plus 6, 25, 20.25. What's happening there? Where's that 8 coming from? Oh no, where's that 8 coming from? Ah, because we're doing the selected number here. So we probably also want to set selected number equal to 0 after you have hit the equal sign. So we can do 8 plus 9 equals divided by 2 equals divided by 2 equals plus 8. So this should be 12 and a quarter. There we go. Plus 7 should be 19 and a quarter times 3 is some number I can't do in my head. And that broke it. What happened there? 3 times 3 equals... Our app is broken. So we're not doing math right. Alright, so let's do a little multiplication. Let's see what's going wrong with our code there. So we'll do 3 times 3 equals 0.0. That is really interesting. So in Xcode, and if you check out our debugging session that we did 3 months ago, at our YouTube channel, ! Links in the chat to get to that. We talked about something called breakpoints. So if I click on the numbers, this blue arrow arrives. So I'm going to put a couple of breakpoints into the app on those numbers and buttons and all that I pressed. And let's figure out what is happening. Multiplication doesn't need the same setup as division. It might. Yeah, because I think, so I tap on my 3, selected number becomes 3. I tap on my multiply, 3 times 0 is 0. You are correct. So this needs to be if total is not equal to 0, we do this line, else total equals selected number. And for this if, it's kind of weird to have an empty if statement, so we can swap that out for something that's called a guard. And guard you usually see at the top of a function because it's meant to be an early exit. So we're saying guard, this statement is true, and if it's not true, else we'll do something. In our case, we're just going to return out of our function. So that kind of simplifies this code a bit, where we don't just have an empty if statement. So we can guard, do our usual check, and carry on. I don't know if we care about current operator in the case of multiplication, but we'll see. So I can hit this little button down here to disable all of my breakpoints in a file, and I can rerun this project. We can do 3 times 3 equals 9 times 9 should be 81. Nope. So yeah, I guess we do need the same guard. Nine times 9 times 9 still equaling 0. So let's bring back our breakpoints and let's see what's going on there. So I'll do 9 times, so we come into here, current operator is not equal to nil. What is total? 0. So we will set that to selected number, which is correct. So then I hit 9, and then I hit equal. So total. So I did PO, that's print object, and it prints out whatever the value is in something. You can also look at things over here in the left pane. So we have total has a value of 9, selected number has a value of 9. We're not plus, we are multiply. So we're going to do total times selected number. We set that to our result label. We clear out our current operator, and we clear out our selected number. I don't think we want to clear out selected number, because that's where our 0 is coming from. So when I hit multiply the next time, yeah. So this clearing out selected number, I think, is where our bug came from. So we can do 9 times 9 equals times 2, because I can do that math in my head. That's wrong. Uh-oh. How did that happen? That is a big number. So we'll bring our breakpoints back in. Got 9 times 9. We know that this pass is good. Times 9 equals. We know that this pass is good. Times 2. So current operator should be nil. So this should... Oh. Do I want these to be not equal? I think I want these to be not equal. My tired brain is starting to catch up with me. It's been a long day. Total is 0. Nope, I'm doing something wrong, and I'm too tired to figure it out. So let's put this back to being equal. So if current operator is equal, if current operator is nil, in multiplication, we want to return. Yeah. Nope. Chad, I don't know. I'm too tired. Too tired. We're so close. Anyone have any ideas, or are we all just gonna stare at this confused like I am right now? Who knew a calculator was so difficult? I've never gotten this far in a calculator on a beginner night, so I've never had to solve this problem. I guess let's see how we got that gigantic 1400 number. So 9 times 9 is equal to 81. So we're great up to this point. So I hit times again. I'll never make fun of the iOS calculator again, right? It's surprising how much ingenuity goes into making these things, and we haven't even made it pretty yet. So here we are Okay. So I had been using 0 for selected number. And that's what's getting us into trouble, because 0 is a valid number that we could add and subtract and multiply and divide. So we actually want to make selected number an optional, which is going to break a whole bunch of things, because basically Swift and iOS does not know how to math on something that doesn't exist. So in the case of plus tapped, we'll use the selected number or 0. So this is what's called nil coalescing. So we're saying if our optional value has a value, go ahead and use it. If it doesn't have a value, use 0 instead. And that's what the double question mark is saying. We'll do the same for minus. And for multiplication and division, we don't want to use 0. So here, we're going to add to our guard statement. And we're going to add to that by saying let selected number equals selected number. So this is what's called unwrapping your optional. And we just so happen to be giving it the same name as it used to have. So you can see that got rid of all of our errors here. I can give it whatever name I want. So we can say unwrapped number equals selected number. Just now I can't say selected number down here. I have to say unwrapped number. And then here we want to guard let selected number equals selected number else. So again, our guard statement says this must be true or else run this code. And the code that we're going to run is these 2 lines. So let's see, we'll turn off our breakpoints and see if that works. Four and a half times 2 I don't think is 18. And 18 times 2 is not 72. Ah! I feel like we almost had it. Chat, we're almost there. 9 times 9. No, the first pass works. Divided by 2. Y is totaled 9. What just happened? What just happened? What? Let's turn our breakpoints on. 9 times 9 equals. I want to move this over so we can have our simulator up on the screen so I don't have to keep jumping back and forth. So we've got our 81 divided by 2 equals, yeah, so how do we get that 9? I need that breakpoint in the divided by. 9 times 9 still works. It's the division that doesn't. So total is 81. Selected number. Down here we need to do selected number equals nil. We need to clear out that selected number. You keep trying to scroll up my code, I'm sorry. What are you trying to look for? So this error is actually saying we can't make this nil, so we want to do self.selected number is equal to nil, and self is saying the value that belongs to this class. Kind of like this in Java, if you've ever coded in Java. We didn't do math right. Okay, we'll bring our breakpoints back in. Actually, let's keep them off for a second. We will do 9 times 9 equals, and then we'll turn our breakpoints on. So we'll do divided. Current operator is nil, so this should leave. But before we leave, we want to set current operator. So that when we come back through, we'll do the same for multiplication. So when we come back through, we go through the right path. 9 times 9 equals, I bet this will be right this time. Yeah! Yeah! Times 2 equals 81. Yeah! Minus 1 plus 8 divided by 2 divided by 2 divided by 2 minus 10. Oh, that doesn't work, but I don't care. We can't do double-digit numbers in our calculator, but chat, we just solved a whole bunch of terrible, terrible bugs. Thank you for clapping, Joe. I really appreciate it. I hope you all learned something tonight. I know I definitely did. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for your questions in chat. I had a great time. This video will be up on demand here on this Twitch channel for the next 2 weeks. And then after that time, I will have it live on our YouTube channel, which is again, !, links in the chat. And I will be back streaming in not this Saturday, but the Saturday after. And I will be learning SwiftUI live on Twitch from absolute zero. I have no idea what SwiftUI looks like. I have never attempted to learn it, and I'm going to do it live before you all. So I hope to see you there. We do this meetup on the third Thursday of every month. If you scroll down below into the About section of this channel, I have roughly the schedule. What time next Saturday? That should also be down below in my schedule. I will be live, I believe, at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, doing the SwiftUI stuff on Saturdays, and then we'll be back here on the third Thursday of next month, where we will teach you all about SwiftUI at again 6:45 p.m. on the third Thursday. So, I hope everyone had a good time tonight. I hope you all have a great couple of weeks until I see you on Saturday, or a month until I see you next month. Stay safe, everyone, and good luck learning some more Swift. If you have questions, hit us up on Twitter. Take care.